Welcome to this explainer. While everyone is busy arguing about AI taking our jobs, or I don't know, whatever the latest tech billionaire drama is, there's a massive, silent shift currently rewiring the global financial system right in the background. It's happening as we speak. Most people have absolutely no clue, but the foundational architecture of global trade, it's fundamentally changing. So let's dive right in and unpack exactly how nations are quietly bypassing traditional US financial infrastructure.
The true scale of this shift really hits home when you look at the raw numbers. U.S. global reserves just hit their lowest level since 1992. Think about that. That is an incredibly important data point, and it's flying completely under the radar. There's no breaking news, no sweaty market analysts panicking on TV, just silence. But this quiet decline is steadily chipping away at a system put in place right after World War II, back when the U.S. was one of the last major economies still standing, and the dollar just became the undisputed default for global finance.
And the stark mathematical drop we're seeing right now is just fascinating. Back in the year 2000, the US dollar made up 71% of global reserves. It was the clear favorite, no contest, right? By 2010, it had slipped just a bit to 66%. But look at where we are today. It is now sitting below 58%. For decades, we've kind of assumed this dominance was as permanent as gravity. But the data proves the financial tectonic plates are absolutely moving.
Now, why does this matter? Well, being the global reserve currency isn't just some boring academic concept for Wall Street bankers. As this quote perfectly captures, it is literally the greatest financial cheat code in human history. Because the world needs dollars to buy oil, settle trades, and pay debts, countries are essentially forced to buy US bonds and hold dollars. The invisible engine of this status quo saves the United States an estimated $200 billion annually. $200 billion. That gives America access to the cheapest capital on Earth. But that engine is definitely starting to sputter. Moving on to Section 2. Triggering the shift. Catalysts for change.
So what exactly caused this seemingly permanent dominance to start cracking? Well, practically every major crisis has pushed this trend along. Right after the 2008 financial crisis and the Fed's quantitative easing, central banks started looking around and asking, wait, are we overexposed to the dollar? Then, in 2014, U.S. sanctions on Russia prompted China to build the SIP system. That's a cross-border interbank payment system built from the ground up to route around U.S. dependence. But the real earthquake? That was in 2022, when the U.S. and its allies froze roughly $300 billion in Russian sovereign assets.
And alongside that massive asset freeze, Russia was cut off from SWIFT. If you aren't familiar, SWIFT is essentially the WhatsApp for global banking. It's the primary messaging network for international funds. Now, regardless of your take on the geopolitics here, that decision sent a massive, undeniable signal to every central bank on Earth. The message was clear. The financial system you completely depend on could be switched off at any moment if you cross Washington. That was the exact moment central banks realized they desperately needed a backup plan.
Section 3. The exorbitant privilege. Unfair advantages.
Now, before we look at those backup plans, we really have to understand the specific structural advantages of the legacy system that are suddenly at risk. For decades, global trade looked like this. If Brazil and China, two countries with absolutely zero direct connection to the United States, wanted to settle a trade, they basically had one option. They had to route it through New York using dollar correspondent banking. Both of their central banks would hold accounts at a New York bank, like JP Morgan or Citi. Every single trade, every payment, every settlement physically touched U.S. regulated infrastructure, simply because there were no other liquid markets to handle these transactions.
The crucial takeaway here is that this specific arrangement gave the U.S. massive unfair advantages. We can break these down into three pillars of exorbitant privilege. First up, intelligence. Clearing trades through New York gives the U.S. a literal bird's-eye view over global trade data. Second, investment. It forces constant global demand for U.S. Treasury bonds, which means cheap debt for America. And third, jurisdiction. It enables the U.S. to act as the supreme regulator, giving it the power to freeze assets. This system wasn't just about facilitating trade, it was, by design, infrastructure built for global control.
Which brings us to Section 4, building the bypassed, a multi-country effort. You see, replacing an 80-year-old financial system isn't easy. It requires proactive, multi-country coordination, and that is exactly what's building right now within the BRICS economic bloc. Originally, this was just Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, but in 2024, the group expanded massively to include Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Iran, Egypt, and a few others. Now, individually, these emerging market economies couldn't even make a dent in the Western-led financial system. But together, they are actively creating shared infrastructure to operate completely outside of those old rules. Seriously, just look at the sheer mathematical scale of this coalition. The expanded BRICS bloc collectively represents more than a quarter of the entire global economy. And population-wise, nearly half of the world's population. This isn't just some friends group having meetings. This is a massive portion of the globe coordinating to route trade deals entirely independently of the United States.
And that brings us to a massively underreported financial story, a new tool called the Unit. Slated for an operational pilot in January 2026, the Unit is a blockchain-based settlement tool designed specifically for these BRICS countries. It bypasses the US dollar by using a completely neutral unit of account. Get this, it's backed 40% by physical gold and 60% by a mix of member currencies. In plain English, it is explicitly designed to replace the role of the US dollar in their trade.
The Unit is trying to do one very specific, highly strategic thing. Give the world a neutral measuring stick for pricing commodities. You see, one of the dollar's deepest, least visible forms of power is that commodities like oil aren't just paid in dollars, they are priced in dollars. The dollar is literally baked into every global price tag. The Unit is a direct technological attack intended to completely break the US dollar's absolute monopoly on price discovery.
But of course, a new currency unit needs new infrastructure to run on. And comparing the old payment pipes to the new ones makes this shift incredibly clear. The old way, as we discussed, relied heavily on correspondent banking via New York. The new way? It relies on platforms like mBridge. That's a blockchain-based cross-border payment platform that actually went live in 2024. mBridge lets countries trade directly with each other. No correspondent banks, no JP Morgan, no New York watching over the global transactions. Poof. The data advantages and regulatory choke points of the old system, they simply disappear.
Let's head into Section 5, the power of optionality, decentralized shifts. Beyond these highly coordinated blockchain tools, there's a broader, much more decentralized macro shift happening right alongside them. We are seeing signals on multiple fronts as countries figure out their own unique ways to step away from the legacy system. Since 2022, central banks have been buying gold at the fastest pace in modern history. In early 2023, Brazil and China agreed to settle bilateral trade in yuan and reals. Late that same year, India bought UAE crude oil using Indian rupees. And for the first time in 50 years, Saudi Arabia is openly discussing accepting Chinese yuan for its oil sales. They are actively bypassing the traditional petrodollar system. Now, none of these things individually, not BRICS, not mBridge, not the gold buying or the bilateral trades, none of them can replace the dollar overnight. But honestly, that isn't the point. The point is optionality. And as the saying goes, optionality kills monopolies. The absolute truth about the dollar's dominance is that nobody chose the dollar because they just loved it so much. They chose it because for over 80 years, there were simply no other options on the table.
Now, for the very first time since World War II, real, viable alternatives actually exist. The infrastructure for a bypass isn't just a theory, it's being built, tested, and implemented in real time. So, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to chew on as you watch the global market shift. What exactly happens to a global monopoly when the world finally gets another option? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and definitely keep your eyes on the data.